All right. So, welcome, Shil. Good to have you back on unsupervised learning.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Daniel.
So, you're the Senior VP of Product Engineering and Data Science at BlackBerry, and you've been on UL before, so good to have you back. And what I wanted to talk about today is deepfakes
Mhm.
and basically what you're seeing around that. And I guess starting off, like what are the main cyber threats that you see deepfakes picking up for us?
Yeah, I think we're constantly getting immersed with, um, this intricate dance with innovation and malicious intent. And I think initially we were seeing that content was getting generated, were textual in nature, like better phishing, more convincing phishing, I would say, or personalized phishing, if you will, from a content perspective, trying to reflect your browsing habits, have a phishing email that would create such that you would probably click on them. And on that, I think it's progressively gotten more sophisticated. And, with media, I think we're seeing, generative AI that is were used for generating content with
Hmm.
the multimodal model technology. It basically revolutionized. I mean, the idea was that it was mostly for the entertainment and education industry. But on the other hand, as we're seeing with these deep fakes, it's not just limited to phishing and textual type of attacks or social engineering attacks, but more powerful sort of reality, indistinguishable reality from fiction type of attacks where, deep fakes cause this dystopian vision that is becoming a reality now. Malicious actors are creating highly convincing videos, audios, individuals saying things that they would never say or do before. Identity theft has been a main fragment of that is sort of coming into effect with these deep voice fakes. So yeah, so I think it sort of started with the deception and now in a full form of identity compromise.
Mm. Yeah, and when you talk about identity compromise, what do you mean? What type of attack would that be? Like, what does the scenario look like?
So I think if you look at like increasing number of deep fakes, what we see in social media, even things that are pretty benign, people trying to lose a few years or trying to lose a few years from their life in terms of looking more young or seeing how they would look if they get older.
Hmm.
Even some similar these benign activities, the most concerning development is the ability to take some of the same technology and apply on voice and creating, voice cloning and voice fakes. And the reason why it is very disturbing as a trend is because typically what you hear, you're being trained to like with all these years is real. Like if you recognize somebody's voice, we our brains are trained to associate relationship based on uh, audio senses. So with deep voice or voice cloning technology coming up, because this enables cyber criminals to create fake identities, that enables people to disclose information that they would otherwise not, pass some biometric, voice checks and things like
Hmm.
that. That's what I mean by
Yeah.
identity cloning.
Yeah, that makes sense. One way I like to think about this is to imagine when I think about what can happen from a deep fake, I like to think less about the deep fake itself and just imagine the impact that it would have. So,
Hmm.
for example, one of the big things is BEC attacks, and this is before AI, right? Or before modern AI.
Hmm.
So it was like you just send an email and say, "Hey, the boss wants you to transfer this money because we're doing this merger and it's really important."
Hmm.
And if the email was uh, convincing enough, then that money would transfer, and they
Hmm.
would lose, thousands of dollars or millions of dollars or whatever. So that would be one. And then there's other things like you're convinced to vote a certain way. You're convinced to have a certain opinion, a positive or negative opinion about a person.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think about the impact of it and then be like, okay, so how do we defend against that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there's multiple ways to trick you into doing something. Like somebody could just get on, and it's not a deep fake at all. They just convince you
Mm-hmm.
that you should transfer this money.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, you should buy this real estate. It's it's oceanside, but somehow it's in the middle of the country and there's no ocean. But
Mm-hmm.
they're just really good at talking, so they convince you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the technique to get you to do the thing might not be the best place to look for it because there's so many of those techniques. The
Right.
question is the money transfer,
Mm-hmm.
the vote,
Mm-hmm.
the opening up access to an attacker to like, hey, I need you to turn on remote access so I can get access in.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that would be the flag, right? What do you think about that sort of mental framework?
Yeah, I think, that is definitely the correct mental framework. I think we're talking about um the malicious intent largely has not changed, right?
Yeah.
Whether, like you said, whether it's, getting people to do something that they would otherwise not, in a very simple terms, right? And the speed at which the act of convincing, the speed, if you could map it to the act of convincing somebody, has definitely increased because of these audio visual, these perceptive senses which we believe as real. What you see is, what the reality looks like. And when that is being questioned on, that sort of definitely, gets it to a point where you are now going to be targeting the different aspects to take advantage of. You talked about financial, social, defamation, personal attacks, like, all of these put together, I think is now the landscape that these actors are operating with some of these technologies. And I think, the most concerning aspect, I'm convinced that, as the technology evolves, like, there'll always be this cat and mouse, but the most concerning aspect, I think, of these deepfakes is the potential for eroding trust from systems that are legitimate, that are true. And,
Hmm.
and I think, that is more of these intangible effects of this technology, I think.
Yeah. So how do you see these being used in attack chains? So we already have existing attack chains. How do you see these being added in or like augmented with this technology?
Yeah, so I think, we started the discussion with, phishing. We talked about this disturbing trend with textual content. Now we're seeing with video. And we're seeing with voice. So voice, we already talked about, for example, identity masquerading, for example, faking voice identity. We've already seen in the media, for example, some of these things playing out with millions of dollars, or potentially private information being disclosed, right? As cyber financial crimes, for instance, right? And in video, like, elections coming up in both Canada and United States, there's disinformation or spread of disinformation at this speed, changing public opinion visually. These are sort of these attack vectors, I would say, like changing perception, changing or distorting reality, in sense for the mass, and also in financial crimes, like, leveraging this technology to defame brands, uh,
Hmm.
create a direct financial, like, you talked about millions of dollars getting siphoned, creating those. So it's all motivated in those areas. So and we're seeing, the reality. It's no longer hypothetical. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. So there was one recently with Ferrari. I don't know if you saw that one. It was
mhm,
it was basically somebody masqueraded the CEO's voice on a phone call, and they actually had done a bunch of stuff on WhatsApp first to
mhm,
get them to the point of almost doing this thing that they wanted.
mhm,
And then the final step was, hey, I would need to talk to you on the phone. So it was Ferrari. So they're Italian. So they have the voice of the person. They
mhm,
also have the right accent from the
mhm,
right part of Italy.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fairly convincing, but something the executive that they were talking to and trying to trick, something made them question it. So they asked him a personal question that they knew
Mm-hmm.
about the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
And the fake CEO, the deepfake, couldn't answer, so they ended the call.
Yeah.
So, I think that was a lucky case that you had somebody who was suspicious.
Mm-hmm.
But have you seen other similar sort of attacks where I guess there was also the one where someone was convincing to send money. I think they actually did convince him
In
to
a
send
British
money.
in a British firm. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
I think the
right.
Ferrari one, I think the Ferrari one is actually a very good case study. Like I think, in that one, I haven't looked fully into it, but on the brief articles that I read, it seemed like the suspicious element was the subtle mechanical intonations in the voice that this
Oh,
executive detected, which sort of got them into sort of questioning. And it's great for this person to have asked a shared secret, if you will, or a previous
yes.
question that they would have otherwise not known. But you know what? Like, my first thought reading that was like, this is real-time voice cloning, right? As you're speaking, it's sort of generating this, right? So the compute cycles that are required typically for audio latencies to work is anywhere from 9 to 42 milliseconds for a continuous stream of communication. And this will get progressively better. Like if it were a static recording that you're playing, like a video, that voice overlay or an audio, for example, or audio voice notes, for example, they would be spot on because it would have had the compute power necessary in the algorithms that we have today that are used by these threat actors. But I bet that this particular technology of real-time cloning, which is as I'm speaking, it is sort of transferring the audio nuances to somebody else's mimicry, would get just better over time. So this is quite concerning. But the other one, I think, I came across Resemble AI or Resemble.ai, I forget, like, they track quite a few of these incidents, like, worldwide,
Hmm.
for many of these fake, like whether it's robocall, AI misinformation, I recently read a report from Deloitte. I think the fastest growing forms of adversarial AI, like deepfake related, are all on financial crimes, like financial losses, and they're projecting about over 12, north of 12 billion in 2023,
Oh,
which
wow.
was the case, and 40 billion by 2027 in aggregate. So, which is is growing at an astounding rate over, I don't know, like 12 to 40, like 25, 30%,
Yeah.
compounding rate. And in one of those reports, especially for the financial crimes, Deloitte reported these fakes are proliferating, mostly in the banking and financial services as being the main target.
Hmm. Interesting. So as the stuff gets better and like you said, it becomes indistinguishable, like there's no way to tell the difference.
Hmm.
Um, so one thing is the voice sounds better, but what I feel like if there's extra context, the more the attacker knows about the thing. So imagine this is a fully automated AI attack. That's even worse. So
Mhm,
it's not even a voice, a real-time clone of a person. It's
mhm,
actually like an AI agent that's just calling and trying to get the things to happen.
mhm,
But it has been given a full database
mhm,
about everything, about you or about me or
mhm.
about this Italian executive. So it knows like the name of their dog because it got it from like Instagram.
Right,
And
right,
it's
right.
got all this personal data about like it knows the wife's name and everything or whatever.
Mhm,
So how do you defend against that? So let's say it's a perfect voice, it's perfectly real time,
mhm.
but it also has deep knowledge from open source intelligence about the actual perpetrator.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think, it's as you were saying, right? I mean, this type of generative AI, adversarial AI, it creates new attack vectors with all of this information, multimodal information that no one sees coming. And it creates a more complex, nuanced threat landscape that prioritizes identity-driven attacks. And it'll only get better. So in the short term, the way I think about this, and most companies that I talk to, their CISOs, is like training, right? The first thing is at least deepfake detection training, which is recognizing inconsistencies in facial expression, audio quality or video quality before disclosing sensitive information, validate using a verification protocol of contacting them through known means, like, for example, through their known contacts like phone, or ask them questions like you talked about this shared secret, like ask them something that they would otherwise have not shared or disclosed. Create these validation protocols and have people be more aware of social engineering from an awareness perspective, right? I mean, that's that's just to get to the short-term problem, just with exposure and training, really. But on a more broader term, I think social engineering awareness basically should drive these regulatory verification process. I think the governments have a part to play here to make content provenance or identity, spoofing using AI as a mechanism, as a mandatory safeguarding. Like in Canada, for example, I can say uh, most of the provinces have enacted legislation on sharing non-consensual media, for example. So the acts are already there in identity fakes, for example, but that needs to be put on AI. The No AI Fraud Act that was introduced in the US House of Representatives, I think earlier this year, I believe, is a good first step, right? Fraud itself, there are regulations around that. There's laws around it. We just need the governments to catch up to the level at which the technology is progressing, and create it within the AI framework. And
Yeah.
I think
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just saying that training and then the regulatory criteria. But there are things in the technology side as well that we can do. But perhaps the immediately there are these two things that come to mind.
Yeah. Well, one thing I worry about there is that I agree the government is going to get involved and should get involved. But I think about spam calls.
Hmm.
In the US, I don't know about Canada. In the US, it's still very bad. I basically have an allow list,
Mm-hmm.
and all other calls just go directly to voicemail because I couldn't handle it any other way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Spam calls are already illegal. Fraud is already illegal. So if the government says it's illegal to do fraud with AI, if it's already illegal to do fraud, I'm not sure what exactly, like, who would be willing to do the fraud without AI,
Mm.
even though it's illegal. But
Mm-hmm.
once the new law came out, they would be like, oh, well, now it's illegal with AI, so I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think, and that's where, so I think that's a great point. So the first thing is, educate, right? We all need to be aware that reality is getting distorted, and be aware of our surroundings.
Yep.
That's number two. We do need some guardrails, regulatory guardrails, right? So that, at least it puts some checks and balances. Or if somebody were to file a complaint, there is a legal framework to act upon. So today, for example, if I went and said something like this happened, the legal framework is not there to support, let's say, the legal proceedings that would follow this. But
Yeah, that's a
also,
good point.
yeah, but also there's a technology side to it, right? I mean, if you take a step back and if you think about it, look, it will get progressively better. And why do I think about it that way? Because this branch of generative AI, works in a way like we talked about this, I think, in our previous discussion about adversarial general networks, right? Adversarial networks, GANs, or various types of autoencoders, for example. Typically, the way it works is like you have two pairs of network, right? One, you know, deep neural network is called the generator that's generating this content, and the other one is a discriminator, and it's critiquing the content. Simple way to think about that. So the generator will get better and better as the discriminator gets better at critiquing the generation, right?
Yep.
A zero-sum game. So the very technology that is sort of enabling to detect and identifying what is a fake and what is real in itself is assisting in getting better at the content. So that's why, I think about this as the need to accelerate the framework, the regulatory framework for authenticity detection technology. So accelerate the innovation on cryptographically securing generative AI content through fingerprint,
Oh, okay. I like
validate
that.
authenticity. The government regulatory criteria can come in and enforce the authenticity. Like we all need to learn how to verify, what is valid and what is authentic content. Just look at how we learned how to check if a browser is safe, right? There is a little
Yep.
safe lock at the left-hand side. Oh, okay, it's safe, right? SSL and all that, right? The same way we need to sort of, do the same thing to learn how to check if a content media is safe. And we consume our content through browsers, right? I mean, all of this thing is manifesting itself in the very vehicle that's delivering it are these browsers. So there is a
Yeah.
way.
And
There's a
mobile
way.
apps and mobile apps.
And mobile apps. But at the end of the day, there is a way.
Yeah.
And we consume most of the content using these sort of instruments. So we can see how I'm drawing these parallels that if we sort of accelerate the innovation on cryptographically securing and validating these fingerprinted content, then we should be able to tackle this technology, right? I mean, think
Yeah.
about
So
currently
I
for us.
like that.
Yeah.
Is it so it's when you're saying legislation, you're not talking about make it illegal to do bad things because it's already
No, no,
illegal.
no. Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about requiring uh technology providers
Yeah.
to have an authenticity mechanism.
Correct.
It's really funny you say that because I was going to bring up a similar point. So we're in Zoom right now. You see when I'm talking, you see I have a green outline around
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
when you talk you have a green outline.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, that's to indicate that that person is talking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously.
Mm-hmm.
However, I've been thinking about exactly what you said, which is what if Apple and Android
Mm-hmm.
and YouTube
Mm-hmm.
and all of Meta,
Mm-hmm.
they had a mechanism
Mm-hmm.
where, so let's say I'm talking to you on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
When I initiate my phone call to you,
Mm-hmm.
it's using my secure enclave on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's verifying that I got in with my face or my finger or
Mm-hmm.
Touch ID or whatever.
Authenticity, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it authenticates that. And
Mm-hmm.
then when the call comes over to you, you
Mm-hmm.
see something. You see a blue outline, you see a green outline, you see a check mark,
Mm-hmm.
just like you said with the lock symbol. So
Mm-hmm.
now when we're having a conversation, it's validated.
Mm-hmm.
So same with this. Like you said, you could do a real-time deepfake pretty soon. So
Mm-hmm.
it looks like I'm talking to Shill, but it's not actually you.
Mm-hmm.
But if there was a green outline and a check mark,
Mm-hmm.
that would mean that some combination of my operating system
Mm-hmm.
and Zoom
Mm-hmm.
had validated and continued to validate.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in the middle of our conversation, we both get prompts
Mm-hmm.
because we've been talking for 10 minutes. We have to re-authenticate the feed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, you're spot on, and I almost think of this as a joint government and industry partnership. Like I'm of I have the opinion that this is definitely a solvable problem.
yeah,
Uh, and as an industry, thought leaders, we have to establish what this common identity assertion protocol is and standardize that. And
yeah,
then all of these companies that are in the business of creating media or transmitting media or exchanging media, sort of, um, adhere by it. Like, I mean, I'm actually quite encouraged to see that DARPA very recently to deal with at least the face swapping technology
hmm
and the puppeteering technology, which is also a phenomenally interesting branch of generative models is where your expressions, you're still the same person, your identity is not stored, but your expressions are. But to deal with that, they initiated a new research, I think, called the Media Forensic Research Acceleration Program, R&D program, if you will, to identify fake digital visual media detection method, right? And that will tackle, those sort of things. But I think in order to deal with the identity side of things or validating, I think, what you're just suggesting is a great way of tackling that. In fact, I was recently reading a paper, like there's this cryptographic mechanism called um, zero knowledge proof. And the
Mhm.
idea is quite simple. It's basically um, there is something that both you and I know without you disclosing what you know. I'm able to verify whether your claims are true or
It's
not.
almost like Diffie-Hellman.
Yeah, except in Diffie-Hellman, there is,
Almost.
yeah, except that there is an
Yeah, but the middle person doesn't get to see the
exactly.
thing exchanged.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And this zero knowledge proof is actually applied in many different places. It's not new, but what is new here is the application of zero knowledge proof in authenticating and privacy maintaining hardware. Like, I came across a company that's sort of dabbling with this called Snark. They're using zero knowledge proof microphones, which, can prove the audio was indeed recorded in that thing. Some media
Mm.
companies like Canon and Nikon are dabbling with zero knowledge imaging technology, whereby they can ascertain that this was actually captured using light rays coming in a camera lens,
Oh,
um,
interesting.
and or if it has been edited in a particular way. But this whole audiovisual industry, coalition, content provenance, authenticity is a serious topic, and it is time that we find ways to certify source of digital content, how it was generated, and things that you just talked about, ascertain before these gadgets like mobile device and other such things are used, validate these things. Right now, if you think about it, right, privacy or identity verification is only used for content that you own. Like, for example, my phone, for example, is going to ask me for my password and a bunch of other things before it shows me my stuff, right? Or
Yep,
opens the phone. But that has no bearing when I'm calling you, for example. Like you have no idea, right?
that's right.
So so this thing is, as you mentioned, is actually now very important, is all of this identity validation that happened on the phone, this trust needs to be expanded into the other entity that you're interacting with. So the trust network needs to be shared using whatever methodology that these companies choose, but yeah, or standardized.
Yeah, so I think that's correct. I'm also thinking about a thing that you said earlier. When you mentioned puppeting,
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
didn't know there was a name for this, but I think it might be the same thing I'm thinking of. So the avatar on the other side looks like this young, um, almost like anime looking influencer girl, and she's like really animated and pretty and everything, and she's talking about whatever the topic is. And then you see right next to it, it's actually like a 47-year-old male, and
Hmm.
he's the one actually doing all of the emoting and
Hmm.
everything.
Hmm.
And it is real-time face swapping and real-time hand swapping, costume, clothes, everything. So that raises an interesting point based on everything we talked about.
Hmm.
At the start of the call, th- um, there was authentication that happened. So they got a green box.
Hmm.
But then this technology is now on.
Hmm.
So now it looks like this other person.
Hmm.
So what this just got me thinking, and I hadn't thought of this before.
Hmm.
This reminds me of gaming situations where games, there's so much hacking happening in games
Hmm.
that a lot of game vendors switch to basically having to run a rootkit.
Hmm.
So they need end-to-end, top-to-bottom, deep kernel implementation
Hmm.
to know that you do not have some sort of shiv
Bypass.
Yeah, some sort of injection
Mm,
capability inside of the thing. And it's looking at all the processes that are running. It's
mm,
looking for evidence of malware. It's looking
mm,
for evidence of
mm,
tampering.
mm,
So, so the question is like, if we start a video call and then I start software like that,
mm,
that technology needs to be able to know that I'm using the Puppet technology and that
mm.
there's an interception and translation happening.
Correct. Yeah. And I think, that's a very well explained kind of thought process. And that's also one of the reasons why I think it's not just that. And I talked about this zero knowledge proof mechanism for authenticity built into the hardware. Because you see, if my camera is showing my video, and if the cam in the live stream, this hardware authenticates that the video stream is basically what it is processing using the ZK hardware research I talked about, then any cross stream or stream muxing in the middle, the receiving software should be able to validate the authenticity that this is not what the camera captured, right? And
Yes.
that is the key, right? It's not just at one level. It has to be that the trust has to go all the way from the physical level, right? The lights and everything around here to what the camera sensor captures to what the media gets digitized. So just trying to tackle at the digital media layer is insufficient. It needs to have the analog. Um, it needs to have the analog ancillary to also transport this authenticity and validation mechanism back for real time communication, whether it's an
Yeah.
audio microphone or a video camera or sensor. Yeah.
Yeah, I love what you're saying there because I love the fact that the hardware itself is involved.
Oh,
So to your
absolutely.
point, Canon and Nikon, so it's almost like they would have their own version of like a secure enclave or something similar where it's like that's a protected system. It's
That's
the
right.
one doing the signing
That's right.
at the camera hardware level, which is
That's right.
part of a later signature, which is passed on.
That's
So
right.
it's like this chain of custody where it's an
Correct.
unbroken thing.
Yeah.
Uh,
But the challenge with that, Daniel, is that you see right now the fragmentation in this space is going to be devastating. Like that's the worst thing that can happen.
yeah.
Fragmentation meaning that, okay, one person is doing or one company doing it this way, the other company is doing it that way, and there is no, like, so that's why I think it's very important that the Logitech camera can interop with some my phone camera, for example, or that
Yes.
interoperability of this. So like imagine if your web browser did something different of SSL and something else did something different, it's going to be just a chaos. So standardization of this mechanism to tackle deep fake, authenticity of digital media, whether it's stored media or media in transit.
You know,
That
that now that I'm thinking about this, I think you're right about that because I think what will probably happen is what we will agree on is we agree to trust Zoom, and then Zoom on each of our sides
mm,
does the camera validation
mm,
because the camera got some sort of certification
correct,
from somebody like Apple or Mac OS or Windows.
correct,
So Zoom trusts the camera, therefore Zoom signs it. Therefore, your side agrees because Zoom signed both
sure,
sides.
sure.
Something like that.
That works. That works too. And yeah, that's that is a kind of standardization, but I was going a little bit broader. I was saying that we should almost go to the layers of network communication the same way how we communicate with streams like we do, like you talked about Diffie-Hellman. I'm talking about, stream establishment at the internet protocols, authenticity of
Oh,
them.
sure.
So I think it's time for us to look at, like, I mean, we can keep patching this stuff, right? We can keep creating these glues and but I think it's time to take a step further and start the contracts of this authenticity of the hardware, the data, like the same way how we digitize the data, we need to embed some of these validation mechanism right into the protocol.
You know, honestly, we should not perfectly on topic, but we should actually collaborate on this because um, I don't think it's going to be easy for a small company to do this. I think this is really going to be like a consortium.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I used to be at Apple. I still know a lot of people over there. I know a lot of people are thinking about this, but I am very surprised that
Mm-hmm.
I have not heard more people talk about what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, um, IPsec,
Mm-hmm.
Raindoll, like all the fundamental protocols, the fundamental algorithms. What is an underlying base standard like TCP/IP,
Mm-hmm.
like TLS?
Mm-hmm.
Um, is it are we doing public key for the exchange? Are we doing
Mm-hmm.
symmetric for
Exactly.
the communication? Yeah. So it's like all those things need to be considered and built into like you said, a fundamental protocol,
Yeah.
which includes the authentication piece, which includes the
Identity.
reprompting for
Yeah.
authentication over certain periods of time based on. Oh, so for example, here would be a great like method for the thing. You have a policy established during the initiation of the call
Mm-hmm.
so that if certain things are being talked about, it
Mm-hmm.
up levels the
Mm-hmm.
requirements so
Mm-hmm.
it prompts both sides more often
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
for revalidation,
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about Apple, and I think it's interesting, right? Apple is in a unique place to really solve deepfakes, is because they have a full control of an end-to-end ecosystem, if you will,
Yes.
um, all the way from the hardware to the content to the method of that content distributes, and they have statistically significant density of communities that interact with those content. So that's one aspect, and the other aspect is I think, if you look at the rate at which the technology is evolving, uh, deep fakes are probably significantly impacting our ability of what reality looks like and or eroding trust from systems,
Yep.
and that is massively concerning.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, one thing I just realized is I would love like a little I think this is probably coming soon with AI agents. So you have like a little bot that is watching this chat. And one of the things it would have reported is um, Shill's background looks like a real background that is blurred. Daniel's background looks to be AI generated. So I'm watching him very carefully to make sure he doesn't have six fingers or something. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So
Hmm.
you could just have an alert that's like right off the start before we even started,
Hmm.
it's a fake background.
Hmm.
You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
Yeah, no,
Um,
absolutely. Yeah. I think there are various ways to solve this, but there are things that can be done in the short term. There are things that can be done in the midterm. But I think if we're talking about thought leadership vision as to where we're going, I think it's time for us to kind of, rethink what we are doing, and how we're going to deal with fakes in general, digital fakes. AI is helping it make better,
yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I think the way you're talking about it is exactly correct. Ultimately, it's a trust issue. So
Hmm.
anything that is eroding that trust is really
Hmm.
the problem, and that's where we start.
Exactly.
And then we start with that trust problem, and then you start thinking about a trust protocol, a
Hmm.
more fundamental technology
Exactly.
protocol like
Hmm.
TCP/IP, like HTTP, something, you know, at a
Something
deeper
more fundamental.
level.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah,
And Daniel, there is also another important thing here. Like, some of these things were developed for entertainment purposes. Like, if you think about it, the very, very premise, right? If you go look up in GitHub and you search for FS GAN, facial expression, and you'll see like incredible research papers and then implementation of them. And they are majority, the goal is to demonstrate what the technology is capable of. Some of the first applications were for fun. And yeah, so what? Like, I sent a picture or video that looks 5, 10 years, of my age taken off, right? as long as I do not claim, I think it's perfectly fine. As long as they say, hey, look, this is, and there's no claims made that this is who I am, or this is what it is. The problem becomes when some, like, so the root of the problem is a fake, whether it's deep or not. I think is a, or AI generated, is a different point altogether.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. It's a great point because there's a harmless removal at
Mhm.
15 years of age,
Mhm.
but if it's a guy and he's trying to get a modeling job, and the modeling company stands to lose money from this contract being
Yeah.
signed,
Hmm.
now that innocent thing is no longer innocent.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which is why, the technology is just enabling, and that's why my points were like we need to find a way to deal with the technology.
Hmm. Yeah. So any tips for people to learn more about this?
Yeah, I think, like we recently did, like the threat research team and the data science team did some work to publish this thing from BlackBerry about deepfakes. I encourage people to read it. I think they're going to find it informative. It's developed in a language that is very easy to understand. And I think right now I would encourage people to sort of learn about these things of what's possible, right? That's the first thing,
Hmm.
so that at least you're skeptical when you see something, or your antennas kind of pick up something that you might otherwise might not have. So awareness, I think, is the key at this time.
Okay. Yeah, we'll definitely put the link to that in the show notes.
Mhm.
Any predictions for like the next year or 2 or 3 years?
Um, well, I think this technology is going to get progressively better. You're going to see more hyper realistic content. In fact, you're going to start seeing full body, not just faces and expression puppeteering. I think you're going to see, hyper realistic content. You're going to see content interacting with other content in social settings. You're going to see more personalized attacks through this mechanism. Public figures or people you dislike, you're going to be able to start a propaganda, and the availability of these tools, like, I mean, from $5 to $15 a month from a subscription perspective, you can create some of this stuff. With a bit of programming, you can go download these GitHub projects and do your own, if you will.
Hmm.
The possibility is limitless. So deepfake as a technology will continue to evolve because it does stoke a innate reason for why we do certain things that are not the best moral grounds, if you will. So it'll
Yeah.
become more sophisticated, harder to detect. The very technology that is required to do this is going to basically enable this growth, and the challenge will be there in the coming years unless we, as a community, do something about it.
Yeah. So the better that stuff gets, the more we're going to need the types of controls that you talked about.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
Where can we learn more about you and your team and the work that you're doing?
We That's great. Like, we have a data science research blog where we publish things that we learn time to time at BlackBerry, papers that we publish. So I welcome people reaching out if they want. I always love to have a great conversation. Some of these conversations we had were very insightful. Yeah.
Okay. Well, awesome. Well, it's great to have you back and great conversation as always. Appreciate the time.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Daniel. Thanks.
All right. Take care.
Bye.